This video is sponsored by Normandy 1998, 212th Trooper, Silas 1610, Carmen CJ, Rune Scribble, and Kitsu the Kitsune. You ever sit down to rank something for fun and halfway through you realize you're basically writing a thesis? Yeah, that's what happened to me with Ash's teams. Because as much as we all love to say things like, Journey's strongest, duh, or Kalos clears, I want to look at these teams a little differently. Not just who would beat who in a fight, but who felt like a real team, who had arcs, personality, cohesion, identity, the whole package. And also which teams kind of felt like Ash just grabbed whoever wanted too close and said, yeah, sure, hop in the ball. So today we're going through every one of Ash's teams and ranking them holistically from worst to best, storytelling wise, not competitively, not based on power scaling, not based on who beat Cynthia's Garchomp in a 1v1, though good on Dracovish for trying. This is just my opinion, backed by reasoning, vibes, and the occasional joke. I am not the Pokemon Emperor. Though the title does have a nice ring to it. No, stop. Ranking video now, world domination later. Yeah, that's the way to do it. So without further ado, let's hop in. We're starting at the bottom with Unova, because, well, someone has to be 8th, and unfortunately this team makes the choice a bit too easy. Unova is the region where Ash decided to go full gotta catch 'em all mode, but still only managed to get less than 6% of the new mons introduced in the region. As a result, he caught the most amount of Pokemon he's ever caught in a region tied with Kanto, and then didn't develop any of them enough for it to matter. Also kind of like a large portion of the Kanto squad, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's focus on the Unova team, and why not start with its positive aspects? Crocodile is cool. Very cool. In fact, Crocodile is one of the few Pokemon Ash didn't catch and immediately feel like a gym badge he left in the wash. Instead, it followed him. It developed across the region, establishing a rivalry with Pikachu, and it has personality for days. And I'm not just saying that because of the cool shades. And that's kinda the only real standout. The problem with Unova is very simple. Too many Pokemon means not enough spotlight, and almost the entire team suffers because of it. Case in point, Boldore exists, but if you can tell me anything about other than Rock Thing makes lasers and once had a cool battle with Clay, I'll be genuinely impressed. Then there's also this weird tonal thing going on, where half the team is goofy comic relief, and the other half is left by the wayside to make occasional appearances. Take Oshawott, Leavanny, and Scraggy. They've got lots of energy, just not a lot of depth, while those who aren't a joke like Snivy and Pheasant get nothing. Narratively, this team is the weakest identity of any core Ash team, since that's the other problem. There is no core. There's no cohesion, no central arc, and no emotional through line. They're just kinda there, switching in and out so rapidly that none of them stick. Even Pignite, who had a promising emotional angle, abandoned, mistreated, and ultimately rescued by Ash, ends up being a watered-down rerun of Charizard and Infernape's arcs, minus the physical and emotional growth to make them all-time greats. And if that's not bad enough, Charizard literally swoops in during the third quarter to take what little spotlight Pignite had as the regional fire starter. It's like the writers themselves said, he's not him, and brought in the Cantonian big guns to close things out. And then, to pour a little salt on the wound, as if the universe itself was calling this team a dud, Unova is the only region that actually made Ash go backwards in league placement. Yikes. Unova isn't terrible, it's just chronically underbaked, and that's why it's last. At number 7, we have Kalos. And okay, before you get out the pitchforks and torches, let me get this out of the way. Individually, most of these Pokemon are awesome. Ash-greninja alone has enough personality, lore, and fan art to fill a small museum. But holistically, as a team, yeah, they don't quite work. Let's start with the elephant-shaped fairy type in the room. This is the region that introduced fairy types, and Ash got none. 0. Even though fairies were everywhere, and half of Kalos' marketing. Then there's the second gimmick of Kalos that made up the other half of the marketing. Mega Evolution. And how many Megas does Ash get? Also none, despite the anime having been quite happy to give Ash Pokemon from prior regions if it highlights the new region's gimmick. Meanwhile, Diantha's out here mega evolving Gardevoir casually like she's stretching for brunch, while Karina is punching Lucario-shaped holes in mountains. And Ash, he gets the most OC-coded power-up that the anime itself now seems intent on erasing because they hadn't gotten around to giving us Mega Greninja yet and wouldn't for over a decade. Then there's the type overlap. 3 flying types and 2 dragons, in a region where dragons are being hunted for sport by Florges and Klefki. Now, I said this wasn't going to be a power scaling video, and that's why I'm not letting things like type coverage dictate rankings. This just felt egregious enough to mention, since for one of the most competent versions of Ash we've ever seen, he makes such a glaring series of errors in judgment when it comes to assembling this team. Don't get me wrong, it's a very cool roster, just not a very cohesive one, and one where the arcs feel uneven. Take Gudra. It gets a beautiful emotional story in which it goes from a helpless creature with confidence issues to a powerful dragon who devotes itself to defending the ones it loves. Then, literally 6 episodes later, Noivern comes along and says, what if we did that again, but less interesting and with no real payoff? And somehow that's better than what Hawlucha and Talonflame get, which is basically nothing in the way of arc or character development. And of course, there is the ash-greninja effect. Once Greninja awakens the bond phenomenon, every major battle turns into Step 1, everyone else fights for 5 minutes, Step 2, Greninja arrives on the battlefield, and Step 3, cue the badass intro music as ash-greninja saves the day. And so after a while, the team stops feeling like an ensemble and starts feeling like that Poochie episode from The Simpsons, where every time Greninja's not on screen, the audience is asking, where's Greninja? In short, the Kalos squad is strong, they're stylish, and they have some of the best individual mons, but as a team, they're not particularly well-rounded, and they feel disconnected from Kalos' whole identity. That lands them at number 7. Johto is interesting. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just kinda solidly fine. Johto's biggest strength is that it reflects the region well. Since Phanpy comes from an egg to show off breeding, Totodile is caught in an apricot ball, and Ash catches his one and only shiny in Noctowl, it really nails the new region, new gimmicks vibe. But Johto also suffers from one major issue. It's a transitional team. It spends a huge chunk of time awkwardly phasing out the Kanto starters, who keep hogging the spotlight like veteran actors unwilling to let the new cast shine. While Charizard has the good grace to leave early and clear the road for Cyndaquil, which is ironic considering how often he comes back, Bulbasaur specifically takes forever to go, and winds up leaving in a really unsatisfying contrived way compared to Charizard and Squirtle. Oh yes, I absolutely buy that now all of a sudden Ash's reserves need a leader and ambassador back at the lab. Definitely couldn't be Kingler, who's calm, mature, and has been at the lab longer than anyone, or maybe Muck, who will do literally anything to please Oak. But getting back on topic before Bulbasaur hijacks this video like he kinda hijacked the Johto team, his continued presence and to a lesser degree Squirtle cast a shadow over Pokemon like Bayleaf, eating up their screen time and not allowing them to fully come into their own, while also taking up a team slot. So the Johto catchers like Heracross and Noctowl are frequently benched, meaning sometimes the team feels less like a Johto squad, and more like Kanto 1.5 featuring some Johto guys. As a result of this issue, the team also lacks a clear ace, and while that's good in the sense that it's not Kalos' Greninja plus some sidekicks set up, it also means the team feels a little directionless, and like they never got a chance to reach their full potential because it took ages for them to be able to stand on their own. In short, the Johto team is charming, they're fun, and they're incredibly middle of the pack in the most literal way. Okay, hot take time. Kanto comes in at number 5. Now, if this were a list about nostalgia, Kanto would be in the top 3 without question, since Pikachu, Butterfree, Pidgeotto, Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charizard are iconic. Legendary even. They're the reason half of us had Pokemon-themed birthday parties growing up. But we're ranking teams, not mascots. And Kanto as a team doesn't entirely function like one. Case in point, for most of the original series, Ash only travels with 5 Pokemon, despite having a bunch of reserves sitting at Oak's lab twiddling their thumbs, and those reserves, rarely used and barely developed. Primeape gets 1 battle, then goes off to become an MMA fighter with a manager already outclassed on the first try. Muck goes from menace to comic relief the moment it's caught, Kingler gets captured and then immediately boxed, and don't even get me started on the 30 freaking Tauros, none of which got used until the Drake fight. To give a bit of clemency, Kanto is the region where Ash is still figuring out what being a trainer even means, with his team reflecting the vibe of early route underdogs, as it's made up of the starters, the regional bird, regional bug, and a rodent you get before Pewter City in the games. Narratively, that creates the sort of thematic link that puts it above Johto, though the fact this is never capitalized on to create a clear team identity, not to mention the mishandling of reserves, and the fact that Charizard habitually disobeys Ash, making it debatable if this team really had an ace either, prevents it from going much higher. Admittedly, the Orange Island helps a bit by adding Snorlax and giving Lapras a memorable arc, but the core issues remain. Kanto has high highs, but equally low lows, creating a memorable but flawed team. Journeys is a weird one, because it feels less like a team meant to show off the new Gen 8 games, and more like Ash assembling an Avengers squad of 6 cool Pokemon he always wanted but never got before. And to their credit, Journeys is the most achievement-heavy team Ash ever had. They beat Wallace, Steven, Cynthia, and Leon, even if that last one required some hacks, and made Ash into the world champion. That alone could slingshot them into the top spot in a different kind of ranking. And each of the Pokemon does get something to make them distinct, be it Dragonite's sweet nature, Gengar's healing after abandonment in a way that didn't feel completely Charizard and Infernape coded, Sirfetch's story of redemption after going from a ruffian to a knight, Lucario's growth from a baby to a warrior, its aura development and Mega Evolution arc, and Dracovish just being whatever Dracovish is. A weird dinosaur puppy thing that sounds like Goku with a head cold. But in spite of these positives, the issue is team identity, or rather, lack of it. This squad feels more like 6 people who have a mutual friend in Ash and so sometimes agree to attend the same events together but never form a dynamic of their own. They rarely interact or bond, despite the semi-slice-of-life structure of the series and Cerise Labs as a setting, to the point where I can't think of a single moment of Sirfetch'd having any kind of interaction with Dragonite that isn't on the battlefield. All this to say, they don't develop as a collective unit or even feel like a squad when they're on screen together. Additionally, as previously hinted, the Gala representation was pretty weak. While Journeys wasn't strictly a Gala show, check out my What If Journeys Was Set in Gala series to see what it'd be like if it was still the Gen 8 series that placed a lot of significance on Gala for people like Leon and Go, yet for some reason the same cannot be said of Ash, when only 1/3 of his team are Galamons, one of whom is a variant of a Kantomon, and when they let Ash use the regional gimmick of G-Maxing, they gave it to Gengar in an act of clear fan service, rather than giving him a G-Max capable Gala team member. Now, I'm not saying it had to be Pikachu and 5 Gala Pokemon, since it was the World Tour era, but when the team is predominantly Kantomons, a Sinnoh fan favorite thrown in for the hype, and then Gala as an afterthought, it's a bit disappointing. So when considering all this together, the Journey squad is impressive, emotional and powerful, but it's not cohesive enough to break the top 3. Hoenn, meanwhile, does crack the top 3, because this is the region where Ash finally looked at his team and said, "Hey, what if I actually trained you?" And the results are fantastic, as the Pokemon genuinely feel like they grow throughout the series, rather than simply being as strong or as weak as the plot demands. Hoenn is the first true hard reset team. No Kanto crutches or Johto leftovers, just a fresh start with Pokemon who actually grow, evolve, and form a unified roster. As a result, this team has a really strong identity, as a bunch of hard-working, slightly quirky battlers who feel like a real adventuring party. Sure, sometimes it leans a little comedic with Torkoal crying everywhere, Corphish being Corphish, and Snorunt frequently freezing Ash, but these quirks feel organic, and give the Pokemon depth rather than detracting from them as characters. And with the Battle Frontier included, the team genuinely gets to feel elite. Sceptile becomes a monster, Swallow breaks the curse of being the regional bird with no personality, and Donphan emerges as a late-game anchor, all the while Ash gets to feel like their captain and coach, growing alongside them and creating moments like working with Pikachu on Volt Tackle, and helping Sceptile regain its moves after Heartbreak. Though, if I did have to cite a flaw, it's that unlike Johto and some of the teams that came after it, the Hoenn squad doesn't necessarily showcase Hoenn's game mechanics off as well as it could. Ash's team doesn't really emphasize things like double battles, abilities, or contests. But what it does show is Ash's first mature, intentional team that sets the template for what every other team would be like for the rest of his tenure in the anime, and that in my eyes is worthy of a strong 3rd place finish. Simply put, Alola is the most wholesome, emotionally rich team Ash has ever had. This is the found family team, where the Pokemon interact, bond, and grow together, becoming a true unit, to the point where Ash chose to keep them together as their own little family with Kukui and Banette rather than send them back to the lab with the rest of his Pokemon. And then there's the Pokemon as individuals. Rowlet is adorable and pulls off Goofy without becoming a joke. Lycanroc is a killer arc whose unique form doesn't feel like an edgy OC. Incineroar's journey from a grieving stray Litten to a true rival to the Masked Royal's ace is both heartwarming and inspiring. Naganadel joins the team and somehow doesn't feel like fan service. Melmetal then joins and also somehow doesn't feel like fan service. You know the team is good when Ash catches a mythical and an ultra beast and the audience say, yeah, that fits. Alola also perfectly integrates Z-moves, its regional gimmick. Ash uses them meaningfully and creatively, so that everything feels earned, with this being an absolutely crucial factor, since this is the team that made Ash a champion after over 20 years of trying, and honestly, no team feels more appropriate for Ash to have achieved this with. The only fault I can give to the Alola squad is that it didn't include any totem Pokemon or regional variants, which were also significant Alola gimmicks, but honestly, that's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things. On the whole, Alola's team is joyful, charming, cohesive, character-driven, and narratively satisfying, which is why it's only beaten by one other team. I imagine most of you probably saw this coming. though I still think it's worth saying that Sinnoh takes the number one spot, and honestly, it's not even close. This is the most complete, well-developed team in the anime. Every single Pokemon has countless meaningful moments, and every single Pokemon gets development. Even the weakest arc, Torterra's awkward evolution that ends its winning streak forever, still has meaning because of how it affects Ash's strategies and Torterra's relationship with its own body, as it fully makes the transition from speedy attacker to team tank. Then you have Weasel's discipline arc, Staraptor's fighting spirit pushing into Master Bravebird, Gliscor's growth from a crybaby who's scared of heights to an air battle master, Gibble's Draco Meteor shenanigans, and then there's Infernape, one of the greatest character arcs in the entire Pokemon franchise, which could be a whole video on its own, though I'll save that for now. Sinnoh also integrates its regional mechanics perfectly through Gliscor and Ambipom with the cross-region evolutions, with this being how I wish they'd handled Mega Evolution in Kalos. Additionally, there was a greater emphasis on training and strategy, as this was the team that expanded the concept of training in improvised moves like Thunder Armor and married them together, having Ash and his Pokemon work together to develop the Counter Shield, a technique that was used all the way up to and during Ash's battle with Leon in the Masters 8 Finals. And then there is the rivalry with Paul. Since this both manifests through individual rivalries like Infernape and Electivire, Staraptor and Honchkrow and the two Torterras, and also through the overall team-wide rivalry that was created through many clashes with Paul, but most notably the Lake Acuity Full Battle. This unites them through a singular sense of purpose not seen in any other team, fully transforming them into a cohesive unit, where each member functions both on their own and as part of the greater whole. That is why the Sinnoh squad is the perfect storm. Great personalities, great battles, great arcs, great regional identity. It's the gold standard for how to write a Pokemon team that hasn't been topped since. And that's my full ranking of Ash's teams based on storytelling, identity, and character arcs. Not strength, not tier list, not who beats who. Just which teams work the best as teams. If you disagree, that's great. Feel free to yell at me in the comments as long as you like the video first. And please hype it if you have some hypes to spare, since it's a great way to help small channels like me grow. But while you're down there, tell me why Kalos should be higher, why Kanto should be lower, or why Pignite deserved better. Because honestly, he kinda did. And I will see you as the journey continues.